What's going on, everybody? This is Josh McCarty from Built in Buffalo. And today I want to talk about Brandon Beane's end of season press conference. It took place on Tuesday. He spoke with the local media for almost an hour. In general, with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, there aren't a lot of specifics they get into at their press conference, but I do think there was enough information given out at that press conference that we can at least start to put the pieces together for this puzzle that's going to be the Bills' 2023 offseason. So let's get into it. The first thing he mentioned is the salary cap. Right now, the Bills are sitting at about $240 million for the 2023 season, and they don't know what the cap is going to be. The league is still not giving them that number. Best case scenario, it comes in right about that 240, but the Bills have a lot of roster spots to fill. They have a lot of free agents to go through. So there is some work to do for the Bills just to get under the cap right now. When you mentioned Jordan Poyer and Tremaine Edmunds specifically, Brandon Beane gave the company line they'd like to have both guys back. It has to work around the salary cap. I do have some thoughts on which one of those players I think is most likely to come back. That'll be a little bit later in this video. Brandon Beane said it's very important not to overreact to one bad game. And although it was your playoff game, it was the game that ended your season, he made a point in his press conference to say, you don't want to forget all the good things that happened during the regular season and overreact to the game that went really poorly, even though it was the last game and a playoff game. When it comes to Ken Dorsey, Brandon Beane, he maybe dropped a little bit of a nugget that Dorsey would be back. He was talking about the offense. He did mention that it seemed like after the bye week, the offense really struggled to get their footing. They couldn't put a complete game together. But the nugget he dropped was he expects Dorsey to improve from year one to year two. Something to think about. We'll get into that in a little bit. When it comes to the defensive side of the football, Leslie Frazier is his contract is up. Joe Marino mentioned that on Locked On Bills. Brandon Beane certainly didn't get into that in his press conference. He mentioned how highly rated the defenses have been under Leslie Frazier. He also pointed to the defensive injuries that happened to the Buffalo Bills. And what's interesting about that, while we all know the names that missed games, Micah Hyde and Von Miller specifically, but Tre'Davious White half of the first half of the season, and then they played games without Edmunds, Milano, Oliver, you know the names. He mentioned guys in the second half of the season that were on the field, but not the best versions of themselves due to injury. And I think we can all figure out that's probably Jordan Phillips. But one interesting name is Gregory Rousseau. And I think a lot of us look at those pass rushing metrics for the Bills and use the Thanksgiving game where Von Miller got hurt as sort of the point in time that everybody else on the defensive line started to fall. And what's interesting about that is the exact point in time also where Gregory Rousseau came back from his high ankle sprain. So I think the Bills are banking on the lack of production we saw from the second half from Gregory Rousseau, while in part probably had to do with Von Miller not being on the field, also could be him not being 100% while recovering from that injury. I thought that was very interesting. He did mention Ed Oliver and said that there is some more meat on the bone for Ed Oliver. He says he's done some good things, but he thinks there's still some more for him to accomplish in this league. Another player he mentioned was Spencer Brown. And he went out of his way to mention that Spencer Brown's played at a small college, Northern Iowa. He missed a year of development due to COVID, and he's a very high-end athlete, but a project. So he's not giving up on Spencer Brown. He did go to say he's not going to hand out roster spots here in January, but I would expect Spencer Brown to be on the roster and competing for that spot. The last thing to kind of round it up with everything we mentioned about the salary cap, he mentioned multiple times, do not expect a Von Miller level signing this offseason. The media did a great job following up on that by saying, Brandon, you said that to us last offseason and you went out and got Von Miller. But he did say that, hey, Von Miller was the big move. I'm still paying for Von Miller this year. So while I am probably going to look for ways to upgrade the roster, don't expect a big household name there. So what's my reaction to all of this? First thing I will tell you is, while he did kind of give the same lines on Poyer and Edmunds, reading the body language, reading the tone, I get the sense that Jordan Poyer is gone. It was very much a thank you tone to Jordan Poyer. We appreciate everything you've done. But it sure does seem like everything you're reading from One Bills Live, One Bills Drive, everything you're reading from Jordan Poyer's family on Twitter, it feels like that this is the end of that era. When it comes to Tremaine Edmunds, though, I'm a little bit more optimistic that the Bills are going to try to get that done. Brandon Beane even did mention that they would consider using the franchise tag on Tremaine Edmunds, which is interesting because him playing off-ball linebacker, the franchise tag is based on not only other middle linebackers, but pass rushers from the linebacker position. And that is an expensive franchise tag. So that to me would be a worst case scenario for the Bills. But I came away from this press conference thinking Tremaine Edmunds is much more of the priority for the Bills than Jordan Poyer. When it comes to Ed Oliver, I think it's obvious at this point that the Bills are really not thinking that they've gotten their money's worth. And you look at some of the other defensive tackles in that draft, Christian Wilkins, Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, Dexter Lawrence, they have been playing at a higher level consistently than Ed Oliver. So Ed Oliver is going into his last year of his rookie deal. He's playing on the 5th-year option, which is expensive. He's counting almost 10 million or over 10 million against the cap. So it's a big year coming up for Ed Oliver. I do get the feeling that Ken Dorsey is going to get a second year with the Bills. Obviously, Brandon Beane did have the slip where he said improve going into year 2. I don't think it's set in stone, though, because I don't think it's going to be Brandon Beane's decision. I do think that this is one of those things that falls under the umbrella of Sean McDermott decisions. And on Sean McDermott's press conference on Monday, he said he was still evaluating everything and wouldn't commit to anything. Now, you would expect that the day after. He's not going to go out there and say, this guy's locked in, this guy's locked in. It was much more of a blanket statement of, hey, guys, it's 24 hours after the game ended. I'm not going to start talking about job security. So I still think there's the chance that the Bills evaluate things and move on from Ken Dorsey. But at this point in time, I'd say it's more unlikely than likely. There is a chance that Dorsey, who is in running for the Carolina Panthers head coaching job, gets that, and then the Bills' hand would be forced. Along those lines, Joe Brady, the Bills quarterback coach, has an interview set up with the Los Angeles Chargers to be their offensive coordinator. And he also has been in rumblings about the New York Jets opening. Joe Brady was thought of very highly in the league a couple years ago before he went to Carolina, and that whole coaching staff struggled under Matt Rule. Would not surprise me if Joe Brady leaves this staff to become an offensive coordinator. And then obviously, I don't think anybody can expect the Bills to go out and make a bunch of free agent splashes this offseason. They just don't have the money. It's not there. I think there are some things the Bills can do to make some room on their cap with some restructures. But in general, I think a lot of what the Bills are going to count on this next season is improvement from young guys on their roster, and I hope a shift of resources to the offensive side of the ball. So that was my interpretation of Brandon Beane's press conference. He's always very generous with his time. He spoke for 55 minutes to the local media. And let us know in the comments, what do you think? Is there anything that you took away from Brandon Beane's press conference that we didn't get in today? Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Keep it glued to Built in Buffalo all offseason long, as now we head toward the offseason portion of the Buffalo Bills.